Judge Michael Harrison sat in his private chambers, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug that read "World's Judge, a gag gift from his daughter 3 Christmases ago." Outside his window, the Portland skyline stretched gray and dreary under typical Oregon autumn clouds. Rain tapped steadily against the glass, creating a rhythm he'd grown accustomed to over 23 years on the bench. He glanced at his watch, 8:47 a.m. Court would convene in 13 minutes. Spreading the day's case files across his mahogany desk, Michael scanned through them with the practiced eye of a veteran. Drug trafficking hearing at 9, custody dispute at 11, sentencing for a repeat DUI offender at 2, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that would make this Tuesday different from the hundreds of Tuesdays that came before it. He'd long ago accepted that the dramatic courtroom moments depicted in television shows were fantasy. Real law was paperwork, procedure, and patience. At 56 years old, Judge Harrison had seen nearly everything the criminal justice system could offer. He presided over murder trials, complex fraud cases, heartbreaking custody battles, and everything in between. Very little surprised him anymore. He developed a sort of emotional armor over the years, a professional distance that allowed him to make difficult decisions without being consumed by them. His wife often joked that he could sleep through a tornado. Nothing rattled him. Down the hall, Officer Jake checked his appearance in the bathroom mirror, adjusting his crisp Portland Police Bureau uniform. At 34, he cut an impressive figure, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of calm, authoritative presence that made people instinctively trust him. But his pride and joy waited outside the bathroom door. Rex, his German Shepherd K9 partner. "Ready, boy?" Jake asked, emerging from the restroom. Rex's ears perked up immediately, his intelligent brown eyes fixed on his handler. The dog was magnificent, 75 pounds of muscle, fur, and training, with a distinctive scar above his left eye that gave him a roguish appearance. They'd been partners for 2 years, and in that time, they'd become one of the most successful K9 teams in the department. Rex had a nose for narcotics that bordered on supernatural, and together they'd been instrumental in taking down 3 major drug operations. Jake knelt down, running his hand along Rex's head in their pre-testimony ritual. "Just like we practiced, buddy. You stay calm, I'll do the talking, and we'll be home by lunch." Rex's tail wagged once, a controlled movement that spoke to his exceptional training. Unlike family pets, police K9s were working dogs first, disciplined, focused, and utterly professional. Rex had never broken protocol, never lost focus during duty. He was, by every measure, the perfect police dog. As they walked toward the courtroom, Jake thought about the case they were testifying in. Johnson, a mid-level drug dealer they'd helped arrest 6 months ago, was finally having his day in court. Rex had alerted to Johnson's vehicle during a routine traffic stop, leading to the discovery of 3 kilos of cocaine hidden in a false compartment. It was a textbook case, and Jake's testimony would be straightforward. Meanwhile, in the courtroom gallery, Sarah was having a much different morning. She sat in the 3rd row back, her arm wrapped protectively around 7-year-old Emma. The little girl was so small, so fragile, all big dark eyes and tangled black hair that Sarah had carefully braided that morning. Emma clutched a worn stuffed rabbit, its fur matted and one ear partially torn. Sarah had tried to replace it with a new one, but Emma had rejected it immediately. This rabbit, dirty and damaged as it was all she had left from her old life. Sarah had been a foster parent for 9 years, and she'd cared for dozens of children during that time, but Emma was different. Emma was broken in a way that terrified Sarah. The girl had been in her home for 8 months, removed from her parents' custody after a drug raid, and in all that time, Emma had barely spoken. She ate mechanically when prompted, attended school like a ghost, and spent hours staring at nothing. Therapists used words like trauma response and selective mutism, but Sarah just saw a little girl whose world had been destroyed. Today was supposed to be a step forward. Emma's custody hearing was scheduled for that afternoon, and Sarah had been approved to adopt her if the judge agreed to terminate parental rights. Emma's mother was serving a 6-year sentence for drug trafficking and child endangerment. Her father had gotten 8 years for the same charges, plus assault on a police officer. Neither had made any effort to contact their daughter. As far as the state was concerned, Emma was eligible for adoption. But Sarah worried, what if Emma never recovered? What if the damage was too deep? She'd loved and cared for this little girl with everything she had, but Emma remained unreachable, locked behind walls Sarah couldn't penetrate. The child psychologist said to be patient, that healing takes time, that Emma needed to feel safe. But 8 months felt like an eternity, and Sarah was exhausted from talking to silence. "You're okay, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, squeezing Emma's shoulder gently. "We're just here to wait for our turn. You don't have to do anything. I'm right here." Emma didn't respond. She never did. Her eyes were fixed on her lap, on the rabbit's worn ears. Her small body was tense, coiled, as if ready to flee at any moment. Sarah's heart ached looking at her. The courtroom itself was standard for municipal court: wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches that had held thousands of anxious people over the decades. The seal of Oregon hung behind the judge's bench, and an American flag stood in the corner. The air smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish. A handful of other people sat scattered throughout the gallery, waiting for their own cases, their own moments of justice or judgment. At precisely 9:00 a.m. the bailiff stood. All rise, the Honorable Judge Michael Harrison presiding. Judge Harrison entered through the side door, his black robe swishing as he climbed to his bench. He settled into his chair with the ease of long practice and scanned the courtroom. Standard crowd, nothing unusual. He spotted Officer and Rex near the front. Good, the K-9 officer was prompt as always. "Please be seated," the judge said, and the rustle of people sitting filled the room. "We'll begin with case number 2019 CR 4782, State of Oregon versus Johnson. Is the state ready to proceed?" The assistant district attorney stood. "Yes, Your Honor, the state calls Officer Jake as our first witness." Jake stood, Rex immediately rising with him in perfect synchronization. They walked down the center aisle, Jake's boots and Rex's claws creating a steady rhythm on the old hardwood floor. This was routine. This was just another day. Neither Judge Harrison nor Officer nor anyone in that courtroom had any idea that in approximately 45 seconds everything would change, that a traumatized little girl would break her silence, that a trained police dog would shatter every rule he'd ever learned, that the truth would emerge in the most unexpected, impossible way. Emma's head began to lift, her eyes following the sound of clicking claws on wood. Something was happening inside her, something breaking through the fog and numbness that had surrounded her for so long. Her grip on the stuffed rabbit tightened. And then she saw him. Emma's entire body went rigid, every muscle locked as her eyes fixed on the German shepherd walking down the aisle. Time seemed to slow, the courtroom sounds fading into a distant hum. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat, in her ears, pounding like a drum that drowned out everything else. It couldn't be, it wasn't possible. But she knew that walk, she knew the way his left ear flopped slightly more than his right. She knew that scar, that distinctive white line cutting through the fur above his left eye. She knew the exact pattern of black and tan on his face, the way his tail had a slight curve at the tip. Sarah felt Emma tense beside her and looked down with concern. "Emma, what's?" The scream tore from Emma's throat before Sarah could finish. "Max." The single word exploded through the courtroom like a gunshot, raw and desperate, and filled with 8 months of silence suddenly shattered. Emma lurched to her feet, her stuffed rabbit tumbling forgotten to the floor. Her arm shot out, pointing with a trembling finger at the dog, and tears began streaming down her face, not quiet tears, but great heaving sobs that shook her entire small frame. "Max, Max, it's Max," her voice cracked and broke, climbing higher with each repetition. "That's MY dog, that's MY Max." Every head in the courtroom whipped toward the little girl. Judge Harrison's hand froze halfway to his gavel, his mouth open in mid-sentence. The assistant district attorney dropped her pen. The court reporter's fingers hovered above her keyboard, suspended in shock. But the most dramatic reaction came from Rex. The German shepherd's ears shot straight up. His head snapped toward Emma so fast that Officer nearly lost his grip on the leash. For 2 years, Rex had been the model of K-9 discipline, focused, controlled, unshakable. He maintained composure during gunfire in crowds, around other dogs, through chaos and confusion. Nothing broke his training. Until now. Rex released a sound that Jake had never heard from him, a high-pitched whine that was almost human in its emotion. It was a sound of recognition, of longing, of desperate need. The dog's entire body began to quiver, his tail wagging so violently it shook his whole back end. "Rex, heel," Jake commanded, his voice sharp with authority and confusion. "Rex, stay." But Rex didn't heel, Rex didn't stay, instead he lunged. 75 pounds of pure muscle and determination threw itself toward Emma with a force that yanked Jake forward. The officer's boots skidded on the polished floor as he fought to maintain control. "Rex, no, heel." The commands meant nothing. Rex pulled harder, his claws scrabbling for purchase, his whines turning into full-throated barks, not aggressive but plaintive, almost crying. His eyes were locked on Emma with an intensity that spoke of recognition that went soul-deep. "Max, Max, it's me." Emma was fighting against Sarah now, trying to climb over the bench in front of her, her small arms reaching desperately toward the dog. Tears poured down her face, her voice hoarse and breaking. I missed you so much." Sarah wrapped both arms around Emma, trying to calm her, trying to understand what was happening. "Emma, honey, please, that's a police dog, you can't." "It's Max," Emma screamed, her voice raw with 8 months of suppressed emotion exploding all at once. "He's my dog, he's mine, they took him and I never." her words dissolved into sobs so violent she could barely breathe. Judge Harrison finally found his voice. Order, he grabbed his gavel and brought it down hard. Order in this court. But order was the last thing anyone had. Rex was now up on his hind legs, pulling with such force that Jake had to brace himself with both hands on the leash. The dog was making sounds Jake had never imagined a trained police canine could make, whimpers, whines, and sharp barks all mixed together in a cacophony of canine distress. "Your Honor, I don't understand," Jake shouted over the noise, his face flushed red with exertion and confusion. "He's never done this. Rex has never broken protocol. I don't know what's happening." Other people in the gallery had stood up now, some backing away nervously, others pulling out cell phones to record the unprecedented scene. The bailiff moved forward, unsure whether to intervene and equally unsure how. Judge Harrison rose to his feet, his usual calm completely shattered. "Officer, can you control your dog?" "I'm trying, Your Honor." Jake planted his feet and pulled back hard on the leash, but Rex was beyond listening. The dog's focus was absolute, total, unwavering. Nothing existed for him except the little girl crying in the gallery. Emma broke free from Sarah's grip for just a moment, lunging forward with her arms outstretched. "Max, please, it's me, it's Emma, don't you remember me?" And then something extraordinary happened, something that made every person in that courtroom freeze. Rex stopped pulling. The dog went completely still, his body quivering but motionless, his eyes locked on Emma. His head tilted to the side in that distinctive way dogs do when they're processing something important. His tail, which had been wagging frantically, slowed to a gentle wave. And then Rex sat. Not because Jake commanded it, not because of his training. He sat because he chose to, his posture suddenly transformed from wild animal to attentive companion. His ears were forward, his eyes never leaving Emma's face, and he let out a soft, almost questioning whine. The courtroom held its collective breath. Emma, still crying but quieter now, took a shuddering breath. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the sudden silence everyone heard her. "You have a scar above your left eye from when you saved me from the glass when I was 5. When Daddy was angry and broke the table and you pushed me away and got cut, you protected me." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. She looked at Rex, squinting at the dog's face, and there it was, a thin white scar cutting through the fur above his left eye. Jake felt his stomach drop. He stared at Rex, at the scar he'd noticed when he first got the dog but had never questioned. A scar Rex had arrived with from the training program, a scar whose origin Jake had never known. "Emma," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking, "how do you know about that scar?" Emma's tear-streaked face turned to her foster mother, and for the first time in 8 months, Sarah saw something in the girl's eyes she'd never seen before: hope. "Because that's Max," Emma said simply, her voice small but certain. "That's my dog. He's been my dog since I was 4 years old. He slept in my bed every night. He knew when Mommy and Daddy were fighting and would hide with me in the closet. He licked my face when I cried. He's Max. That's my Max." Judge Harrison slowly sank back into his chair, his mind reeling. He looked at Officer, at the dog, at the crying little girl, and realized with absolute certainty that he was no longer looking at a routine Tuesday. He was looking at the impossible. "Bailiff," the judge said quietly, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, "clear the courtroom. Everyone except Officer, the child, and her guardian." Now, the courtroom emptied slowly, reluctantly. People shuffled toward the exits, craning their necks to catch one more glimpse of the drama unfolding. The assistant district attorney gathered her files with shaking hands, casting bewildered glances at Officer. The defendant, Johnson, was escorted back to holding, his own legal troubles temporarily forgotten in the face of something far more compelling. Within 3 minutes, only 6 people remained: Judge Harrison, his bailiff Tom, Officer, Rex, Sarah, and Emma. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma had stopped screaming, but tears continued to stream down her face in silent rivers. Her eyes never left Rex, and the dog's eyes never left her. They were locked in some wordless communication that transcended species, transcended the years apart, transcended everything that had happened to tear them from each other. Sarah kept her arms wrapped around Emma, but looser now, uncertain. Her mind was racing through the implications of what she'd just witnessed. Emma's case file had mentioned nothing about a dog, nothing. There had been mentions of the home's condition, the drug paraphernalia found, the neglect, but no pets. How was this possible? Judge Harrison removed his reading glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. In 23 years on the bench, nothing had prepared him for this. He dealt with disputed property, with custody battles over children, even once with a case involving ownership of a prize-winning horse. but a traumatized child recognizing a police K-9 as her family pet. This was unprecedented. "Officer," the judge said carefully, his voice measured and controlled despite the chaos he felt inside. "How long have you had this dog?" Jake's face was pale, his usual composure completely shattered. He looked down at Rex, who remained sitting but alert, his attention still fixed on Emma. 2 years, Your Honor, almost exactly 2 years. I received him from the Pacific Northwest K-9 Training Academy in November 2017. And his history before that. Jake swallowed hard. The academy sources dogs from various places: breeders, shelters, owner surrenders. Rex came to them as a young adult, about 2 years old at the time. They evaluated him, found he had the right temperament and drive for police work, and put him through their 12-week certification program. I was assigned to him after my previous K-9 retired. So you don't know where he came from originally? No, Your Honor, Jake's voice was strained. The academy doesn't always provide detailed histories. What matters is the dog's aptitude for the work, not their background. Rex passed every evaluation with flying colors. He's been an exemplary police dog. Judge Harrison turned his attention to Sarah and Emma. "Ms., I need you to tell me everything you know about Emma's case. Was there any mention of pets in the home?" Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. "Your Honor, I've only had Emma for 8 months. She came to me directly from the emergency removal. The case file I received mentioned the condition of the home, the arrests of both parents on drug and child endangerment charges, but—" She paused, trying to remember. "There was nothing about pets, nothing I saw anyway." "Emma," Judge Harrison said gently, leaning forward and softening his voice in a way he reserved for child witnesses. "Can you tell me about Max? When did you get him?" Emma's voice was hoarse from screaming, barely above a whisper. "I was 4. Daddy brought him home. He was a puppy. Daddy said Max would protect me." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "He did protect me. When things got bad, Max was always there. He would sleep by my door, and when I was scared, I could pet him and feel better." "And what happened to Max? When did you last see him?" Emma's small body began to shake with sobs. "The day the police came, there were so many people. They were yelling. Mommy was crying. Daddy was angry. They put handcuffs on them. A lady took me outside to a car, and I kept screaming for Max, but they wouldn't let me go back. I could hear him barking inside. He was scared. Her voice broke completely. "I never got to say goodbye. I thought he was dead. I thought they killed him because nobody wanted him." Sarah's own eyes filled with tears as she held Emma. This was the most the girl had spoken in 8 months combined. All this time, Sarah had tried everything: therapy, patience, gentle encouragement, and Emma had remained locked in silence. But now, faced with her lost dog, the floodgates had opened. Judge Harrison felt his chest tighten. He cleared his throat, fighting his own emotional response. "Officer, that scar above Rex's eye, do you know how he got it?" Jake looked at Rex's face, really looked at it, studying the scar that had always been there, that he'd accepted without question. "No, Your Honor, he came with it. I always assumed it was from before his training, maybe a dog fight or an accident. It never affected his performance, so I never investigated it." "Emma," the judge said, "you mentioned the scar came from glass. Can you tell me more about that?" Emma nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her voice was steadier now, strengthened by memory. "I was 5. Daddy came home really mad. He'd been drinking the bad stuff that made him mean. He started yelling at Mommy, throwing things. He picked up a glass from the table and threw it at the wall, and it broke into a million pieces. Some came flying at me, and Max jumped in front of me. He got cut right here." She touched above her own left eye, "and he was bleeding really bad. Mommy had to use towels to stop it. She didn't take him to the doctor because Daddy said we didn't have money, but she cleaned it really good. It healed, but the fur never grew back right. You could always see the scar." The courtroom was absolutely silent except for Emma's voice and the occasional soft whine from Rex. Jake felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. He knelt down beside Rex, running his fingers gently over the scar. How many times had he touched this dog, groomed him, cared for him, without knowing this story, without knowing that this mark represented a moment of loyalty and love, a dog protecting his child. "Your Honor," Sarah said carefully, "I need to call Emma's caseworker. If what Emma is saying is true, this dog should be in her case file. The removal report should mention all animals in the home." Judge Harrison nodded. "Bailiff, contact Child Protective Services and get Emma's full case file, including the initial removal report. I want every document related to her case. Also, contact Animal Control for the city. I want records of any animals picked up from," he glanced at the file on his desk, 1847 Southeast Street on January 15, 2017. Tom immediately pulled out his phone and stepped away to make the calls. "Officer," the judge continued, "I need you to contact your K-9 coordinator at the training academy. Get Rex's full history, every document they have about where he came from, when they acquired him, everything. Yes, Your Honor. Jake's hand was still resting on Rex's head, his mind reeling. Could this really be true? Could his partner, his trusted K9 who had worked beside him through dangerous operations and long nights, actually be this little girl's family pet? The dog who had alerted on drug vehicles, who had tracked suspects through the woods, who had performed flawlessly in every test and operation. Could that dog have once been named Max and slept in a little girl's bed? Emma suddenly pulled away from Sarah and dropped to her knees on the floor. Can I go to him? Please, I won't hurt him. He won't hurt me. Please, I just need. Emma, honey, we should wait, Sarah started, but Judge Harrison held up his hand. Let her approach, he said quietly. Slowly, Ms. Keep a hand on her shoulder, and officer, maintain control of the leash, but let's see what happens. Sarah helped Emma to her feet, and together they moved slowly toward where Jake stood with Rex. The German shepherd's entire body quivered with barely contained energy. His tail began to wag, slowly at first, then faster. Emma stopped 3 feet away, her small frame dwarfed by the large dog. For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then Emma whispered, Max, sit pretty. Rex's response was immediate and instinctive. The dog rose up on his hind legs, his front paws tucked against his chest in a begging position, a trick Jake had never taught him, a behavior Rex had never displayed in 2 years of partnership. Jake's legs nearly gave out. Oh my God, he breathed. Emma's face split into a smile, the first real smile Sarah had ever seen on the girl's face. Good boy, Max, good boy. Judge Harrison's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. In all his years presiding over cases, he'd prided himself on maintaining judicial composure, on seeing facts clearly through emotional fog. But watching Rex perform a trick on command from a little girl he supposedly didn't know had shaken something fundamental in him. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't imagination or wishful thinking from a traumatized child. This was real. Officer, the judge said, his voice tight with controlled emotion, has Rex ever performed that behavior before, that sit pretty position? Jake shook his head slowly, unable to tear his eyes away from Emma and Rex. The girl had dropped to her knees and was now running her small hands through the dog's fur while Rex pressed against her, his tail wagging so hard his entire back end swayed. Never, Your Honor, I didn't even know he could do it. We train police K9s for tactical commands, sit, stay, heel, search, alert, not pet tricks. But he did it immediately when Emma commanded him. Yes, sir, Jake's voice cracked, like muscle memory, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Sarah watched in amazement as Emma buried her face in Rex's neck, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to release years of pent-up grief. The dog remained perfectly still, accepting her embrace with a gentleness that contradicted his intimidating appearance. His eyes were half closed, and he was making a low, rumbling sound in his chest, not a growl, but something almost like a purr. He used to make that sound when I was sad, Emma whispered, pulling back to look at Rex's face. When Mommy and Daddy were fighting and I'd hide in my room, Max would find me and make this sound. It always made me feel better. She touched the scar above his eye with one finger, tracing it gently. Does it still hurt? Rex licked her hand. The courtroom door opened and bailiff returned, his phone still pressed to his ear. Your Honor, I have Flores from Child Protective Services on the line. She's Emma's primary caseworker. She's pulling the file now. Put her on speaker, Judge Harrison commanded. A woman's voice crackled through the phone, professional but clearly confused. Your Honor, this is Flores. Tom said there's an emergency regarding Emma. Is she all right? Ms. Flores, this is Judge Harrison. Emma is physically fine, but we have an unusual situation developing. I need you to access Emma's initial removal report from January 15, 2017. Specifically, I need to know if there were any animals present in the home. There was a pause, the sound of papers rustling. Let me pull that up. Okay, I have the incident report here. Officers responded to 1847 Southeast Street following a tip about drug activity and possible child neglect. Upon entry, they found Carlos and Maria in possession of a substantial quantity of methamphetamine and cocaine. The home was deemed unsafe for the minor child due to drug paraphernalia, unsanitary conditions, and evidence of domestic violence. One minor, Emma, age 6 at the time, was removed and placed in emergency foster care. Animals, Ms. Flores, were there any animals? More rustling, I'm looking. The responding officer noted the presence of one dog, German Shepherd, approximately 3 to 4 years old, brown and black coloring. The dog was, yes, here it is. The dog was secured by animal control during the removal process. No other pets were present. Judge Harrison leaned forward. What happened to that dog? Let me check. Animal control would have those records, Your Honor. We don't typically follow up on pets after removal unless they're part of a hoarding situation or animal abuse case. My notes indicate the child was distressed about leaving the dog behind, but that's standard in these situations. Children form attachments to pets and separations can be traumatic, but our priority is always the child's safety. Ms. Flores, I need you to come to the courthouse immediately. Bring every document you have related to Emma's case, every single page. Your Honor, I'm in the middle of 3 other cases today. This takes priority, Judge Harrison interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. I'll have a squad car sent to transport you if necessary. How soon can you be here? The caseworker's confusion was palpable through the phone. 30 minutes, Your Honor. Can you tell me what this is about? You'll see when you arrive. Thank you, Ms. Flores. He nodded to the bailiff, who ended the call. Next, the bailiff dialed animal control. The conversation took longer, with multiple transfers and holds as various officials tried to locate records from nearly 2 years prior. Emma remained on the floor with Rex, whispering to him in a voice too low for others to hear. The dog's attention never wavered from her. Finally, a supervisor from Animal Control was patched through. This is Robert, Senior Animal Control Officer. Judge Harrison, I understand you need records from January 2017. Yes, Mr. A German Shepherd was picked up from 1847 Southeast Street on January 15, 2017, during a police operation. I need to know what happened to that dog. Keyboard clicking came through the speaker. Let me search. Okay, yes, I have it. Call was logged at 2:47 p.m. Officers responded to assist Portland PD with an animal removal during a drug raid. One German Shepherd male, approximately 45 pounds at the time. 45 pounds, Jake interrupted. Rex weighs 75 pounds now. That's normal growth for a young adult male German Shepherd over 2 years, officer, Robert continued. The dog was transported to our northeast facility. Let me check the disposition. This is odd. Judge Harrison felt his stomach tighten. What's odd, mister? The dog was initially logged as an owner surrender, which is incorrect procedure for a seizure situation. Someone made a clerical error. Because of that error, the dog wasn't held for the standard reclaim period. Instead, he was processed through our adoption program, and according to these notes, he was transferred to the Pacific Northwest K-9 Training Academy on February 3, 2017, just 19 days after intake. The courtroom went completely silent. Jake's face had gone white. February 3, 2017. That's exactly when the academy told me they acquired Rex. They said he came from a shelter, showed exceptional aptitude, and was fast-tracked into their program. But he wasn't a shelter dog, Judge Harrison said slowly. He was a seizure from an active investigation. He should have been held as evidence or returned to the family after the case was resolved. Your Honor, I can only tell you what the records show, Robert said, his voice now tight with the realization that his department had made a significant mistake. Due to the dog went through standard protocols for owner-surrendered animals. The family was never because, according to our paperwork, there was no family to notify. Sarah's arms tightened around Emma, who had gone very still, listening to every word while keeping one hand buried in Rex's fur. Mister, I need you to do something for me, Judge Harrison said. I need you to verify if that dog was. Your facility scans all incoming animals, correct? Yes, sir, that's standard procedure. Let me check. Yes, the dog was scanned on intake. Microchip number 985,113,001,274,556. It's registered to. There was a long pause. Oh God, it's registered to Carlos at 1847 Southeast Street. Owner name is listed as Max. Emma let out a small gasp. They named him Max because he was part of our family. Daddy did that when we got his chip at the vet. Judge Harrison closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his expression was grave. Mister, you're telling me that Animal Control scanned a microchip that clearly identified the dog's owner, but still processed him as an owner surrender and transferred him to a K-9 academy. Your Honor, this is inexcusable. The officer who processed the intake should have flagged the microchip information. I don't know how this happened. We'll launch an immediate internal investigation. You'll do more than that, Judge Harrison said coldly. You'll send me every document you have related to this dog, intake forms, transfer papers, correspondence with the K-9 Academy, everything. I want them within the hour. And mister, you'll also send me the name of every person who handled this case because someone's negligence separated a child from her family pet, and I want to know exactly how it happened. Yes, Your Honor, immediately. The call ended and Judge Harrison sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of bureaucratic failure with devastating human consequences. A traumatized 6-year-old girl had been ripped from her home, watched her parents arrested, and lost her dog, her primary source of comfort and security, all because someone at Animal Control had checked the wrong box on a form. Jake was staring at Rex with an expression of stunned disbelief. 2 years, he whispered. I've had him for 2 years. We've been partners. I've trusted him with my life, and the whole time, he looked at Emma, at the little girl who was gazing at Rex with pure love in her eyes. The whole time he was her dog. He's been a good police dog, Judge Harrison said quietly. That's not in question, officer. You've done nothing wrong. Neither has Rex. But the question now becomes, what do we do about it? The courthouse door burst open and Flores rushed in, her arms laden with file folders and her face flushed from hurrying. She was a woman in her mid-40s with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a blazer that had seen too many emergency calls and coffee-stained mornings. Her eyes immediately found Emma on the floor with the German Shepherd, and she stopped dead in her tracks. What in the world? Breathed, her files nearly slipping from her arms. Ms. Flores, thank you for coming so quickly, Judge Harrison said. Please have a seat and put those files on the table. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Set down her files but couldn't take her eyes off Emma. Your Honor, I've been Emma's caseworker for 8 months. In all that time, I've never heard her speak more than 1 or 2 words at a time. She's been essentially mute since her removal, but right now she appears to be. His voice trailed off as she watched Emma whispering to the dog, stroking his ears with a familiarity that spoke of years of practice. She's talking to her dog, Sarah said softly, her own voice thick with emotion. Or rather, she's talking to Max, the dog she lost the day her world fell apart. Looked from the dog to officer to the judge, confusion written across her face. I don't understand, that's a police K-9. Not originally, Judge Harrison said grimly. He proceeded to explain everything that had transpired in the last hour, Emma's recognition of Rex, the dog's unprecedented response, the trick he'd performed on command, and the devastating discoveries from Animal Control's records. As the judge spoke's face shifted from confusion to shock to something approaching horror. She sank into a chair, her hand pressed against her chest. You're telling me that when we removed Emma from that home, we also inadvertently took away the one constant source of comfort and love she had, and then, through bureaucratic error, we gave her dog to the police department. That's exactly what I'm telling you. His eyes filled with tears. She'd been a caseworker for 15 years, had handled hundreds of cases, had seen children removed from unimaginable situations. She'd always believed in the system, trusted that despite its flaws, it ultimately protected children. But this was a failure of such magnitude that it made her question everything. Emma never told me about Max, whispered. She never said anything. I asked about her home, about what she missed, about what made her happy before. She wouldn't answer. I thought she was protecting her parents or processing trauma. I never imagined. She thought he was dead, Sarah said quietly. She told me. She thought when they took her away, they'd killed Max because no one would want him. Emma looked up at that moment, her tear-streaked face turning toward. Ms. Flores, you didn't know. I didn't tell you because talking about Max hurt too much. Every time I thought about him, I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was easier to not talk at all. Wiped her eyes quickly, trying to maintain professional composure. Emma, honey, I'm so sorry if I had known. We need to verify this beyond any doubt, Judge Harrison interrupted, though his tone was gentle. The microchip records are compelling, but I want absolute certainty before we proceed. Ms. Flores, do your files contain any photographs of Emma's home from the removal day? Nodded, already reaching for her folders. Yes, the responding officers took photographs as part of the evidence collection. Let me find them. She pulled out a thick envelope and spread several photographs across the table. They showed a rundown apartment, cluttered and dirty, drug paraphernalia visible on surfaces. But in 3 of the photos, a German Shepherd could be seen in the background, lying on a worn couch, standing near a doorway, sitting beside a child's backpack. Jake moved closer to examine the photos, Rex walking beside him with Emma's hand still resting on the dog's back. He picked up one photo, studying the dog in the image. The markings match. The scar is visible here, see? He pointed to one clear shot where the dog's face was turned toward the camera. That's Rex, or Max. The microchip is registered to the family, Judge Harrison said. The dates align, the physical description matches. The dog responds to commands only Emma would know, but I want one more piece of evidence. I want that microchip scanned again here now with everyone present as witnesses. Your Honor, I can call a mobile vet, offered, already pulling out her phone. Doctor works with Animal Control and CPS on cases like this. She's 10 minutes away. Make the call. While they waited, Jake knelt down beside Emma. The little girl looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, as if afraid he might take Max away from her again. Emma, Jake said gently, I need you to understand something. For 2 years, Max has been my partner. We've worked together every single day. He's helped keep people safe, stop bad people from selling drugs that hurt other kids. He's been a hero. Emma's lower lip trembled. Are you going to keep him? Are you going to take him away again? Jake's throat tightened. He looked at Rex, this dog he'd trusted, worked beside, even confided in during long night shifts. Then he looked at Emma, this small, broken girl who had just come back to life after 8 months of silence. I don't know what's going to happen, he admitted honestly, but I promise you, whatever is decided, it will be what's best for Max, for both of you. Doctor arrived 12 minutes later, carrying a professional microchip scanner in a black case. She was a petite Asian woman with kind eyes and steady hands that spoke of years of veterinary experience, quickly briefed her on the situation. Well, doctor said, kneeling beside Rex, this is certainly a first for me. Let's see what we find. She powered on the scanner, a device that looked like a price checker from a grocery store. This won't hurt him at all, sweetie, she said to Emma, who was watching with anxious eyes. She ran the scanner slowly over Rex's shoulder blade, where microchips were typically implanted. The device beeped, and doctor studied the digital readout. She frowned, ran the scanner over the same spot again, then checked the number on her screen against a database on her phone. The room held its collective breath. Microchip number 980,5,113,001,274,556, Doctor read aloud. Registered in the Home Again database to Carlos, 1847 Southeast Street, Portland, Oregon. Pet name, Max. Registration date, June 8, 2014. Dog's date of birth is listed as April 2013, making him approximately 6 years old now. She looked up, her expression grave. This dog is definitively registered to Emma's family. Emma let out a sound between a sob and a laugh, clutching Max's fur. I told you he was Max. Jake stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to the room. His shoulders were shaking. Sarah watched him with empathy, understanding that he was grieving the loss of his partner even while that partner sat alive and well just feet away. Judge Harrison's voice was heavy when he spoke. Doctor, for the record, is there any possibility of error? Could the chip have been implanted incorrectly, or could the scanner be malfunctioning? No, Your Honor, I scanned him twice and my equipment is calibrated and certified. Furthermore, the chip's registration predates officer acquisition of the dog by over 3 years. There's no question about the chain of ownership here. This dog belonged to Emma's family first. Flores was typing rapidly on her laptop, pulling up additional records. Your Honor, I'm looking at the initial police report from the raid on the home. The responding officer noted in his report, and I'm quoting here, one German Shepherd, adult male, extremely protective of the minor child. Dog had to be secured in another room before child could be safely removed due to defensive posturing. The officer interpreted the dog's behavior as potentially aggressive, but now. She looked at Max, who was leaning against Emma with his eyes half closed in contentment. Now it's clear the dog wasn't being aggressive. He was trying to protect Emma. He always protected me, Emma said softly. When the police came, Max stood between me and the door. He was barking, but he wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was scared. He was trying to keep me safe because he didn't understand what was happening. Sarah's heart broke anew. So they forced the dog away from Emma to remove her, then animal control took him, misclassified him, and sent him to police training. Emma lost her parents, her home, her stability, and her dog all in the same day, and for 8 months she's believed he was dead. Not just believed, added quietly, checking her notes. According to my initial assessment, Emma showed signs of traumatic grief consistent with multiple losses. Her therapist noted that Emma seemed to be mourning something beyond her parents' incarceration, but Emma wouldn't communicate what. We assumed it was the loss of her home, her school, her normal life. We never knew about Max. Judge Harrison stood and walked to where Emma sat with Max. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. Emma, I need to ask you something important. Do you understand that Rex has been a police dog for 2 years? He has an important job keeping people safe. Emma nodded solemnly, her hand still buried in Max's fur. Officer said so. Max is a hero. He is, so I need to figure out what's fair for everyone. What's fair for you, what's fair for Officer, and what's fair for Max. Do you understand that this is complicated? Emma's eyes, wise beyond her 7 years, met the judge's steadily. Max was my family first, before the police, before Officer. Max was mine when I had nobody else. Judge Harrison returned to his bench, feeling the weight of every one of his 56 years pressing down on his shoulders. He made difficult decisions before, sentences that would alter lives, custody rulings that tore families apart or kept them together, verdicts that meant freedom or imprisonment. But this felt impossible. Let me make sure I understand the situation clearly, he said, speaking slowly as if laying out the facts would somehow make them easier to navigate. We have a dog, currently designated as Rex, who is registered via microchip to the family under the name Max. This dog was improperly seized and processed by animal control due to clerical error, then transferred to a K-9 training academy where he was subsequently certified as a police service dog and partnered with officer. Is that accurate? Yes, Your Honor, confirmed, her voice subdued. And during his time as a police K-9, has Rex, Max, performed admirably? Jake turned from the window, his eyes red but his voice steady. More than admirably, Your Honor. Rex has been involved in 43 successful drug seizures. He's tracked 7 missing persons, 3 of whom were children. He alerted on a vehicle last year that led to the arrest of a major methamphetamine distributor and potentially saved dozens of lives. He's worth approximately $40,000 in training and operational value to the Portland Police Bureau. $40,000, Judge Harrison repeated softly. He looked at Emma, still sitting on the floor with Max, looking so small next to the powerful dog. Ms., what can you tell me about Emma's condition since she's been in your care? Sarah chose her words carefully. Your Honor, Emma has been the most challenging placement I've had in 9 years of fostering. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't engage, wouldn't connect. She ate when told to eat, slept when told to sleep, went to school like a ghost. Her teachers reported that she never participated, never raised her hand, never interacted with other children. She's been seeing Dr. Rachel, a child psychologist, twice weekly since February. And doctor's assessment? Severe trauma response, possible dissociative symptoms, selective mutism stemming from complex PTSD. Doctor said Emma had experienced so much loss in such a short period that her mind essentially shut down to protect itself. The prognosis was uncertain. Doctor hoped that with years of therapy, Emma might eventually begin to heal, but there were no guarantees. Judge Harrison watched Emma whisper something to Max, watched the dog's ear twitch in response. And how would you characterize Emma's behavior in the last hour? Sarah's voice broke. She's a different child, Your Honor. In 1 hour, she's spoken more words than in 8 months combined. She's expressing emotions, making eye contact, showing affect. It's like watching someone come back to life. Flores pulled out her phone. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to call Doctor now. She needs to know about this development, and her professional opinion would be valuable in determining what's best for Emma. Make the call, put it on speaker. Dr. Rachel answered on the second ring. Is everything all right with Emma? Doctor, this is Judge Michael Harrison. I have you on speaker in my courtroom. Flores is here, along with Emma's foster mother, Sarah, a Portland police officer, and Emma herself. We have an extraordinary situation that requires your immediate input. Your Honor, of course, how can I help? Quickly explain the situation, the recognition, the reunion, the microchip confirmation. As she spoke, Doctor's professional composure cracked with audible gasps and exclamations. Wait, you're telling me that Emma's service dog, no, her family dog, has been in Portland this entire time working as a police K-9, and Emma just discovered this today. That's correct, Judge Harrison confirmed. And Doctor, I need your professional opinion. In your assessment, how critical is this dog to Emma's psychological recovery? There was a long pause. When Doctor spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Your Honor, in 8 months of treating Emma, I've tried every evidence-based intervention available for childhood trauma. Play therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, art therapy. Nothing has broken through Emma's protective shell. I've been deeply concerned about her long-term prognosis because without being able to process her trauma, without being able to connect with others, Emma was at serious risk for lifelong psychological difficulties. And now, Your Honor, the fact that Emma is speaking, that she's expressing emotions, that she's engaging with her environment, this is more progress than I've seen in all our sessions combined. The bond between children and their pets, especially in traumatic circumstances, can be profoundly significant. For many children in Emma's situation, pets represent the only safe, unconditional love they've experienced. Max was Emma's anchor, her security, her constant in a chaotic and frightening home environment. Doctor, I need you to be very clear, Judge Harrison said carefully. Are you saying that Emma's recovery depends on being reunited with this dog? Another pause. Your Honor, I can't make absolute predictions in psychology, but I can tell you that separating Emma from Max again, now that she knows he's alive, now that she's reconnected with him, would constitute a significant additional trauma. It would reinforce her worst fears, that anything she loves will be taken away, that she has no control, that the world is fundamentally unsafe. It could undo what little progress we've made and potentially cause lasting damage. Jake's face had gone pale again. He looked at Rex, at Max, and then at Emma. The little girl was watching him with those huge, frightened eyes, as if she could sense the decision weighing in the balance. "But Your Honor," Jake said, his voice strained but determined, "with all due respect to Doctor, we have to consider the larger picture. Rex isn't just a pet, he's a certified police K-9. He's actively saving lives. Those drug seizures I mentioned, each one means drugs that aren't on the streets, that aren't being sold to kids Emma's age. Those missing persons he's tracked, those are someone else's children who got to go home safely." "Are you saying your need for the dog outweighs Emma's need?" Judge Harrison asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "I'm saying both needs are legitimate and important," Jake replied, meeting the judge's gaze. "I'm saying that this isn't a simple choice between a traumatized child and a police department's property. It's a choice that affects public safety, affects the Portland Police Bureau's operational capacity, and yes, affects Emma. But it also affects every potential victim whose life might be saved by Rex's work." "Spoke up, Your Honor. I have to point out that Emma is a ward of the state. The state has a legal and moral obligation to prioritize her above other considerations. We removed her from her home to protect her. We're supposed to be advocating for her best interests." "And what about the interests of future victims of drug trafficking?" Jake countered, his frustration showing through his professional veneer. "What about the 12-year-old who won't get addicted to fentanyl because Rex helps us intercept it? What about the missing child who will be found because Rex can track scents other dogs miss?" "That's not Emma's responsibility," Sarah interjected, her arms tightening protectively around Emma. "She's 7 years old, she's lost everything, her parents, her home, her sense of safety. And now you want to take away the one thing that's brought her back to life because hypothetically, maybe someday, Rex might help solve another case." "It's not hypothetical," Jake said, his voice rising. "It's statistical fact. K-9 units have higher success rates than officers working alone. Rex has proven his value dozens of times over. I'm not trying to hurt Emma, but I can't ignore the reality that Rex's work protects the entire city." "Officer," Judge Harrison said quietly, and something in his tone made everyone fall silent. "Let me ask you something. If Rex were injured tomorrow and couldn't work, would the Portland Police Bureau cease to function?" Jake hesitated. "No, Your Honor, we have other K-9 units. Rex could be replaced." "Could Emma's bond with Max be replaced?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Jake opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, at the way her small hands gripped Max's fur, at the life that had returned to her eyes, at the hope written across her face. "No," he finally whispered, "that bond can't be replaced." Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "The law is clear on ownership. The microchip establishes that Max belongs to the family. However, Carlos and Maria are both incarcerated and have made no effort to reclaim their property. Emma is a minor in foster care. Legally, the dog is either still the property of the family, to be held in trust for Emma until she turns 18, or he could be considered abandoned property given the circumstances of the seizure." "What does that mean practically?" Sarah asked. "It means I have discretion. I could rule that Max should be returned to Emma immediately. I could rule that Rex should remain with Officer and the police department. Or," he paused, an idea forming, "or I could craft a solution that serves both interests." Emma's voice, small but clear, cut through the tension. "Judge Harrison, can I say something?" Every eye turned to the little girl. She stood up slowly, her hand still resting on Max's head. When she spoke, her voice was steady, carrying a wisdom that belied her 7 years. "Max loves helping people, I know he does, and Officer loves Max too, I can tell, maybe. Maybe we don't have to choose. Maybe there's a way we can both have Max, because Max has enough love for everyone." Judge Harrison felt something catch in his chest. Out of the mouths of babes, he thought. "Emma," he said gently, "you might be the person in this courtroom." Judge Harrison stood and walked around his bench, removing his robe as he did so, a gesture that signaled he was stepping out of his formal judicial role and into something more human, more personal. He draped the robe over his chair and approached the small group gathered around Max. "I've been a judge for 23 years, he began, his voice thoughtful. "In that time, I've learned that the best solutions aren't always found in legal precedent or statutes. Sometimes they're found in common sense and compassion. Emma, you've given me an idea, but I need everyone's cooperation to make it work." Jake straightened, his expression wary but hopeful. "What are you proposing, Your Honor?" "A 90-day trial period," Judge Harrison said. During this time, we gradually reunite Emma with Max while Rex maintains a modified duty schedule with the police department. It won't be easy, and it will require compromise from everyone, but I believe it could serve both Emma's therapeutic needs and Portland's public safety interests. Pulled out a notebook, already taking notes. What would this look like practically? Judge Harrison began packing, thinking aloud. Officer, what's Rex's typical work schedule? 4 days on, 3 days off, Your Honor. 10-hour shifts, usually evening and night hours when drug activity is highest. He lives with me during off-duty time. And how long can a police K-9 work before retirement? Most K-9s work until age 8 or 9, depending on their health and performance. Rex is 6, so theoretically he has 2 to 3 more years of active duty ahead of him. The judge nodded. Here's what I'm proposing. For the first 30 days, Emma visits Max 3 times per week under supervision. These visits happen at officer home during Rex's off-duty days. This allows Emma to reconnect with Max while minimizing disruption to Rex's police work. Officer, you'd supervise these visits, which would also allow you to maintain your bond with Rex. Sarah raised her hand hesitantly. Your Honor, I live in Southeast Portland, and I assume Officer doesn't live next door. Transportation could be challenging. I live in Beaverton, Jake said, about 40 minutes from your neighborhood, but he paused, looking at Emma, then at Max. Something in his expression softened. I could come to you, bring Max to Emma's home for visits. It might be good for him to see where Emma lives, to understand that she has a safe place now. Emma's face lit up with hope so bright it was almost painful to witness. Really, you'd bring Max to visit me? Jake knelt down to Emma's level, and for the first time since this extraordinary situation began, he smiled at her. Yeah, kiddo, I'd do that. Max clearly loves you, and, well, I'm starting to understand what you mean to each other. Judge Harrison continued. For the second 30 days, we increase contact. Emma gets overnight visits with Max on weekends when Officer isn't working. This serves 2 purposes. It deepens Emma's therapeutic progress, and it gives us data on how Rex performs with divided attention and loyalty. You're testing whether Rex can handle having 2 homes, said, understanding dawning in her eyes. Exactly, police K-9s are remarkably intelligent and adaptable, but we need to ensure that this arrangement doesn't compromise Rex's effectiveness or put Officer at risk during operations. If Rex becomes confused or his performance declines, we'll need to reconsider. Jake's jaw tightened, and if his performance does decline, if having Emma back in his life makes him less focused on the job. Judge Harrison met his eyes steadily. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But officer, I've watched Rex in this courtroom today. When Emma gave him a command, he responded instantly. That's not confusion. That's a well-trained dog with the capacity to understand different contexts. I'm betting that Rex is smart enough to know when he's working and when he's with Emma. Doctor's voice came through the phone speaker, excited. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of gradual exposure therapy I would have designed if I'd known Max was available. Controlled, supervised contact that builds over time, allowing Emma to re-establish trust and security. This could be extraordinarily beneficial. For the final 30 days, the judge continued, we evaluate whether a permanent arrangement is feasible. This might mean Rex's early retirement from active duty, or it might mean a continued shared custody situation if Rex proves capable of handling both roles. The Portland Police Bureau would need to be involved in this decision. Was typing rapidly. Your Honor, I'll need to get approval from my supervisor and likely the State Child Welfare Services Director. This is highly unusual. Everything about this case is highly unusual, Ms. Flores, but I'm confident that when you explain the circumstances and the potential benefits to Emma's recovery, you'll get approval, and if you don't, I'll make some calls myself. Sarah spoke up, her voice trembling with emotion. What happens at the end of 90 days? What if Emma's attachment to Max grows even stronger? What if separating them becomes even more traumatic? It was the question everyone had been thinking but afraid to ask. Judge Harrison took a deep breath. That's why officer cooperation and good faith are essential. This trial period isn't just about Emma adjusting. It's about everyone involved making difficult assessments about what's truly best for all parties. Jake was quiet for a long moment, his hand resting on Rex's head while Emma's hand rested on the dog's back. Man, child, and dog connected in a chain of touch that represented everything at stake. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. Your Honor, I became a K-9 officer because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to protect people, especially kids, and Rex has helped me do that. We've gotten drugs off the streets that might have hurt children just like Emma. He looked down at Emma, and she looked up at him with those huge, trusting eyes. but what kind of officer would I be if I protected children in the abstract while hurting one standing right in front of me? Does that mean you agree to the trial period? Judge Harrison asked. Jake nodded slowly. I agree, but I need a promise from everyone here. If at any point during these 90 days Rex's performance declines, if he shows confusion or conflict that could endanger my safety or the safety of others, we stop immediately and reassess. I won't compromise public safety, even for Emma. Is that understood? That's more than fair, the judge agreed. We'll establish clear metrics for Rex's performance. Any decline triggers an immediate review. Agreed. Everyone nodded. Emma tugged on Jake's sleeve, and when he looked down at her, she said solemnly, "Officer, I promise I'll help Max be the best police dog ever. I'll tell him every time you bring him that he has to listen to you and be brave and help people, because that's what Max does. He helps people. He helped me when I was scared, and now he can help other people too." Jake's eyes filled with tears. This little girl, who had every reason to be bitter and selfish after everything she'd lost, was promising to share her beloved dog to help others. He reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. "Emma, you're pretty remarkable, you know that." She gave him a small, shy smile. "Max helped me be brave, now I can help him be brave too." Judge Harrison returned to his bench and picked up his gavel, but didn't put his robe back on. "Then it's settled. I'm ordering a 90-day trial period beginning immediately, with the terms I've outlined. Ms. Flores, I need you to draft a formal agreement that includes the visitation schedule, performance benchmarks for Rex, and regular check-ins with doctor to monitor Emma's progress. Officer, I need you to coordinate with your superiors at the Portland Police Bureau and get their approval for this arrangement." "Yes, Your Honor," they said in unison. "I want written reports every 30 days from Doctor, from Officer K9 Supervisor, and from Ms. about Emma's adjustment. We'll reconvene here in 90 days to determine the permanent arrangement." He looked at each person in turn. "This is uncharted territory, and I'm asking all of you to be flexible, patient, and committed to making this work. Can you do that?" A chorus of agreement filled the courtroom. "Good," Judge Harrison finally smiled, the first genuine smile he'd allowed himself since this extraordinary situation began. "Then let's start right now. Officer, do you have any obligations for the rest of today?" Jake checked his watch. "I was supposed to testify in the Johnson case, but obviously that's been postponed. My shift doesn't start until 6 p.m. "Then I suggest you spend the afternoon with Emma and Ms. Let Emma show you her home. Let Rex see where Emma lives. Start building this bridge between his two worlds." The judge's expression grew serious. "And officer, thank you. What you're doing requires real courage and generosity." Jake looked at Emma, at the hope and joy radiating from her face, and felt something shift in his chest. "Your Honor, I think I'm getting more out of this than I'm giving up." The same courtroom that had witnessed such extraordinary drama 3 months earlier now buzzed with an entirely different energy. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting golden rectangles across the wooden floors. Judge Harrison sat at his bench, reading through the stack of reports that had been submitted over the past 90 days, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Officer Jake entered first in full dress uniform, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. But it wasn't his appearance that drew everyone's attention. It was the way he walked, with visible emotion barely contained beneath his professional demeanor. Rex walked beside him, the German shepherd's gait confident and strong, his K9 badge gleaming on his vest. Then Emma entered, holding Sarah's hand. The transformation was staggering. Gone was the hollow-eyed, silent ghost of a child who had sat in this courtroom 90 days ago. In her place walked a bright-eyed 7-year-old wearing a yellow dress with sunflowers on it, an outfit she'd picked out herself, Sarah had noted in her report. Emma's hair was neatly braided with ribbons, and most remarkably, she was smiling. The moment Emma saw Rex, she let go of Sarah's hand and actually ran across the courtroom. "Max," she called out joyfully. Rex's tail began wagging immediately, but he held his position until Jake gave the release command. "Okay, boy, go say hi." The reunion was immediate and jubilant. Emma dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around Rex's neck while the dog nuzzled her face, his tail wagging so hard his entire back end swayed. Jake watched them with an expression that mixed pride, affection, and something that looked like peace. Flores entered next, followed by Dr. Rachel, who had requested to attend in person. The psychologist was a tall woman with kind eyes and graying hair, and she couldn't stop smiling as she watched Emma with Rex. "Please everyone be seated," Judge Harrison said. "Except you, Emma. You and Max can stay right where you are." Emma looked up, still hugging Rex. "Is it okay, Judge Harrison? Are we in trouble?" No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. In fact, I think you might be the reason everyone in this room is smiling today. But before we talk about the future, I want to hear about the past 90 days. Ms., let's start with you. How has Emma been doing? Sarah stood, her hands clasped in front of her, her voice strong and clear. Your Honor, the change in Emma has been nothing short of miraculous. In the first 30 days, she had supervised visits with Max 3 times a week. After the very first visit, she came home and spoke in complete sentences for the first time since I'd known her. She told me about Max, about her memories of him, about what they'd done together that afternoon. Sarah's eyes glistened with tears. By week 2, she was sleeping through the night without nightmares. By week 3, she was participating in school, raising her hand in class, making friends. Her teachers couldn't believe the transformation. They thought we'd switched children. And the second 30 days, when Emma had weekend overnight visits. Even more remarkable, Your Honor, Emma began to thrive. She joined the school art club. She invited a friend over for something she'd never done before. She started talking about the future, making plans, expressing hopes and dreams. It was like watching a flower bloom after a long winter. Judge Harrison nodded, making notes. Doctor, your professional assessment. Doctor stood, holding a thick file. Your Honor, in my 15 years as a child psychologist, I have never witnessed such dramatic therapeutic progress in such a short. Emma's reconnection with Max has been transformative. Her trauma symptoms have decreased by approximately 70% according to standardized assessment tools. She's processing her feelings about her parents' incarceration in healthy ways. She's building secure attachments with Sarah and other trusted adults. Most importantly, she's accessing joy again, something I wasn't sure we'd ever see. In your professional opinion, what would happen if we separated Emma from Max now? Doctor's expression grew grave. It would be devastating, Your Honor, not just a setback, but a potential psychological catastrophe. Emma's recovery is built on the foundation of this reunion. To take Max away now would confirm her deepest fear, that love is temporary and loss is inevitable. It could cause irreparable harm. Judge Harrison turned his attention to Jake. Officer, please stand. I've read your supervisor's report, but I want to hear from you directly. How has Rex performed during this trial period? Jake stood at attention, his voice carrying the formal tone of official testimony. Your Honor, I was initially concerned that dividing Rex's attention between police work and Emma would compromise his effectiveness. I'm pleased to report that my concerns were unfounded. He paused, glancing at Emma and Rex. If anything, Rex has become more focused during operations. It's as if reconnecting with Emma has settled something in him. His alert rate remains at 94%, actually up 2% from before. He's successfully completed 12 operations during this period, leading to 6 arrests and the seizure of approximately 15 kilograms of narcotics. Has there been any confusion in his behavior, any difficulty transitioning between his role as Police K9 and his role as Emma's companion? None, Your Honor. Max seems to understand context perfectly. When I put his work vest on, he's all business. When I take it off, especially when we're with Emma, he transforms into something gentler. It's remarkable to watch. Judge Harrison leaned forward. But officer, I need you to be completely honest with me, even if the answer is difficult. Can Rex continue to work as a police K9 indefinitely while also being Emma's dog? Jake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Your Honor, I've spent the last 90 days watching something extraordinary happen. I've watched a traumatized little girl come back to life because of this dog. I've watched her learn to trust again, to hope again, to love again. And I've realized something important. He looked directly at the judge. Rex will eventually retire from police work, all K9s do. Maybe in 2 years, maybe 3, but Emma is 7 years old. She has her whole life ahead of her. And the foundation we're building now, the healing that's happening because of Max, that will affect the rest of her life. What are you saying, officer? Jake took a deep breath. Your Honor, I'm requesting that Rex be retired from active duty, effective immediately. I've already discussed this with my superiors and they've approved the request. Rex has given 2 years of exemplary service to Portland. Now it's time for him to serve Emma full-time. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Emma's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Sarah grabbed hand, both women fighting tears. Officer, Judge Harrison said carefully, are you certain about this? Police K9s are typically your partners for their entire working lives. This is a significant sacrifice. Jake smiled and it transformed his entire face. Your Honor, I don't see it as a sacrifice anymore. I see it as the right thing. Besides, he glanced at Emma with genuine affection. I'm not losing Rex entirely. I've spent 3 months getting to know this remarkable little girl. If Sarah and Emma are willing, I'd like to remain part of Max's life and theirs. regular visits, help with training and veterinary care, maybe teaching Emma about responsible dog ownership. Judge Harrison searched for the word. Like a mentor, Jake said firmly, or maybe even like family. Emma burst into tears, not sad tears, but tears of overwhelming joy. She ran to Jake and threw her arms around his waist, hugging him tightly. "Thank you, officer, thank you, thank you, thank you." Jake's own eyes filled as he hugged her back. "You can call me Jake, Emma. I think we're past the formal stuff." Sarah stood, her voice shaking. "Your Honor, I need to say something. 3 months ago, I was struggling to reach Emma to help her heal. I felt like I was failing her. But this process, this incredible solution you created, has given Emma back her life. It's also shown me the power of community, of people coming together to do what's right even when it's hard." She looked at Jake with profound gratitude. "Officer Jake, your generosity and compassion have been extraordinary. You've taught Emma that there are good people in the world who will fight for her, who will sacrifice for her. That lesson is worth more than anything I could teach her." Flores added, "Your Honor, I've also learned something during these 90 days. I've learned that sometimes the best solutions can't be found in policy manuals or regulations. Sometimes healing requires creativity, flexibility, and faith in people's capacity for goodness. This case will change how I approach my work with foster children." Judge Harrison felt his throat tighten with emotion. He cleared it professionally and picked up his gavel. "Based on the reports I've received and the testimony I've heard today, I'm making the following rulings. First, I'm granting Sarah's petition to legally adopt Emma. The adoption will be finalized within 30 days. Emma gasped, looking up at Sarah with wonder. "Really? You really want to adopt me?" Sarah knelt down, taking Emma's face in her hands. "Oh, sweetheart, I wanted to adopt you from the very beginning. I was just waiting for you to be ready. You're my daughter now, if you'll have me." "Yes," Emma threw herself into Sarah's arms. "Yes, yes, yes." Judge Harrison continued, his voice wavering slightly. "Second, regarding the dog designated as Rex but registered as Max, I'm ordering that ownership be transferred to Sarah as Emma's legal guardian. Max will reside permanently with Emma and Sarah. Officer will retain visitation rights and consultation on Max's care." He looked at Jake. "The Portland Police Bureau has agreed to cover Max's veterinary expenses for life in recognition of his 2 years of distinguished service. Officer, your K-9 supervisor has informed me that you'll be partnered with a new K-9 within 60 days. Jake nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. A young German shepherd named Duke. He's in training now." "Good," Judge Harrison smiled, "but I suspect Duke will have some big paws to fill." "He will," Jake agreed, looking at Max with affection. "But Max has set an excellent example." Emma tugged on Jake's sleeve. "Can you bring Duke to meet Max sometimes, so Max can teach him how to be a good police dog?" Jake laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "I think that's a great idea, Emma. Max can be Duke's mentor, just like I hope to be yours." Judge Harrison brought his gavel down with a decisive crack. "Then it's settled. This court finds that the solution reached over the past 90 days serves the best interests of all parties involved. Emma gets her dog back. Max gets to retire with the child he's loved and protected. Officer gains an extended family. And all of us get to witness that sometimes. When people choose compassion over convenience, everyone wins." He stood, and everyone in the courtroom stood with him. "This case is closed, but I have a feeling this story is just beginning. Ms. or should I say, Ms. and daughter Emma, you're free to take Max home. Officer, thank you for your service, both to this city and to this child." As the courtroom emptied, an extraordinary scene unfolded. Emma sat on the floor with Max, talking to him in that special voice children reserve for their most beloved companions. Jake knelt beside them, his hand resting on Max's back, explaining to Emma about Max's favorite commands and habits. Sarah stood with and Doctor, all 3 women watching with tear-stained faces. "Look at them," whispered. 3 months ago, Emma couldn't speak. Now she's building a family. "Not just building," Doctor corrected gently. "Healing, and teaching all of us something important in the process." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "That love isn't a finite resource, that dogs have enough heart for multiple people, that the right solution isn't always found in rules and regulations, but in compassion and creativity. That little girl and that dog have taught us more about resilience, forgiveness, and hope than any textbook ever could." Judge Harrison, still at his bench organizing his papers, overheard the conversation. He looked up, watching the scene before him. The little girl, the dog, the police officer, the foster mother, soon-to-be adoptive mother, all connected by an impossible situation that had somehow resolved into something beautiful. 6 months later, Judge Harrison would receive a photograph in the mail. It showed Emma, now 8 years old, standing in her new backyard. Max sat beside her, his tongue lolling out in a doggy grin, his police vest retired but his spirit unchanged. On Emma's other side stood Jake in civilian clothes, his arm around a younger German shepherd, Duke, who was looking at Max with what could only be described as admiration. Sarah had taken the photo and written on the back, "Dear Judge Harrison, Emma wanted you to see how well Max is doing in retirement. He's teaching Duke the ropes during their weekly. Emma also wanted you to know that she got an A on her My Hero essay at school. She wrote about you. Thank you for believing that the impossible was possible. With gratitude, the family and Max and Jake and Duke." Judge Harrison would frame that photo and keep it on his desk for the rest of his career. On difficult days, when cases seemed impossible and solutions appeared out of reach, he would look at that picture and remember, sometimes when people choose love over law, compassion over convention, and creativity over rigidity, miracles happen. And sometimes those miracles start with a little girl pointing at a police dog in a courtroom, and a judge brave enough to believe that there might be a better way forward than the obvious path. In the end, they all got what they needed. Emma got her Max back, and with him, her voice, her hope, and her future. Jake got to witness transformation and became part of something bigger than police work. Sarah got a daughter who could finally receive her love. Max got to retire as a hero and spend his golden years with the child he protected since she was 4 years old. But perhaps most importantly, everyone involved learned that sometimes losing your partner means gaining a family, that sometimes the best solutions require sacrifice, that sometimes a 7-year-old girl's wisdom exceeds that of all the adults in the room. And that sometimes, just sometimes, love really does conquer all. The end.